Good evening and welcome once again. I plan to keep recording these reflections through this week, even with the Holy Week services on as well. Once again, if you're finding them useful, please feel free to pass them on to others. And secondly, thank you for all the comments and encouragement. It's good to know that these are helpful and that God is using them or using me to produce them, or maybe it is both. Throughout this week on the Methodist Church in Ireland Facebook page, the Reverend Dr. Janet Unsworth is recording Holy Week messages in the mornings as something else that would be worth checking into. Also, I posted it on Facebook earlier. There's an animated film of John Bunyan's classic Pilgrim's Progress, and I believe you can get it for free. Just go to the website and register with your email address. And I would imagine it'd be a good watch, especially in Holy Week, maybe as part of your thinking of Christian faith. This is the beginning of Holy Week. So our reflections this week are going to take a look at some of the occasions and moments of Jesus' last week of life on earth. At the end of our reading yesterday, in yesterday's service, there is a curious verse that seems somewhat superfluous. It serves as a conclusion to the triumphal entry. This is what it says, Mark 11, verse 11. Jesus entered Jerusalem and went into the temple courts. He looked around at everything. But since it was already late, he went out to Bethany with the 12. It seems rather strange or anticlimactic to have entered the city in such jubilation only to turn round and leave. Well, it was likely that Jerusalem was packed with people because it was Passover, and therefore there's a good chance that Jesus and his disciples had arranged to stay in Bethany because it was only a couple of miles away from Jerusalem. However, that begs the question, why did they go at all? Why did they go to Jerusalem if they were going to stay in Bethany that they passed earlier that day? Well, verse 11 tells us, it was so that Jesus could go to the temple courts. One of the most visited places in England, or indeed London, when people go to visit is Westminster Abbey. A place that people go to pray, yes, but also to have a look around, to see the sights of it, to marvel at its structure, the height of its ceiling, and to think about the history that's taken place there, royal weddings, the coronations of kings and queens. And that sort of sounds familiar to what Jesus did at the temple courts. He visited them, he looked around at everything, and then he left. Not too unlike a tourist at Westminster Abbey. Go and visit and then leave, take it in and then leave, look at everything, then leave. Was Jesus really just on a sightseeing tour? I think not. I think we know that when Jesus went to the temple, he went to pray. How can we be sure? Well, consider this. The next day, Jesus and his disciples head back to Jerusalem, and once he gets there, he returns to the temple courts. The place he had been the previous evening, the place where he had looked around at everything, and he throws the tables over. He chases the money changers and those who are selling doves. And he quotes to those who are left the words of God given to Isaiah and Jeremiah. My house will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it into a den of thieves. Suddenly, verse 11 seems like Jesus went in, looked around at everything that there was there, but became sad and left, seemingly unable to pray because it is not mentioned in the text. We know from the Gospels that Jesus took himself off to quiet places to pray, but the place that God had purposefully set aside for prayer was not quiet, but rather a place of commerce and trading, a place full of noise, of bartering salespeople and customers. So Jesus returned the following day to restore it to the use it was meant for. Jesus didn't hold back that day, and neither did he lose control. This was a measured response to what he had observed the night before, a righteous anger so that God's house would be honoured once more and respected. When we don't honour or respect someone's house, we don't honour or respect the owner of that house either. Would you do that in your own home? That's a question I hear Sarah ask child-minded kids at times. The sense being, don't do it here if you don't do it there. Respect our home, respect me. I think Jesus is saying the same thing. If you don't respect my home and you use it for what it is for, then you don't respect me. So this week, will we respect God's home and be sure to use it for what it is meant for? Maybe that sounds a little odd when we can't be in our buildings, but I'm not speaking about buildings. Paul tells the believers in Corinth, you are the temple of the living God. So, will you let God clear out the things he did not intend your life to be used for, so it can be restored to what it was made for? Will we respect God's home? Will you become a house of prayer once again? I think throughout this week our thoughts will centre in on prayer regularly, partly because of the global pandemic at the minute of COVID-19, partly also because prayer plays a large part in this last week of Jesus' life. I believe that Jesus went to pray. Circumstances were that the house of God had become a den of thieves, and so he retreated only to return to begin the restoration of his kingdom the following day. Let us pray. God, let your kingdom come in us. Let our lives be houses of prayer. Let us use them in ways that respect you, the one who lives and dwells in us. Lord, come and clear out the things of our lives that are not of you, greed, selfishness, dishonesty, and restore us to the purpose for which you made us. Lord, let our lives become lives of prayer, lives of constant conversation and communion with you. Help us all as we journey through this time and as we reflect this week together on your journey to the cross. Amen.